Welcome to Westborough's 6th Annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Celebration. Thank you for joining us in this special event. My name is LaToya Thomas with Westborough Public Schools. This year, the theme of our celebration is Walking the Path to Dr. King's Beloved Community. As we commemorate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we strive to create a more inclusive and harmonious society.
And my name is Pastor Jeff Goodrich, pastor at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Westborough, and leader of the Interfaith Clergy Association of Westborough. Like any big community event, many different people and organizations have partnered together to make this happen. And so we are grateful for everyone's contribution, in particular to the 4 different organizations sponsoring today's event. And that is Westborough Connects, Westborough Public Schools, the Westborough Interfaith Association, and Central Massachusetts Connections in Faith. And then in addition, thank you to Westborough TV for your efforts in recording the first hour of our program on the Westborough Public Library, which has a mobile library table set up the stairs. And of course, also a big thank you to our primary funders for today's program, especially Westborough Public Schools and the Westborough Cultural Council. That's a local agency supported by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, a state agency. At some point throughout our event, we do invite you to visit the Community Art Project over here. That started in 2019 at our very first MLK Community Celebration, and we continue to add to it over the years. So I think to the right of it, there's a table and there's some paper squares. Each of those squares has a quote from Dr. King on it, and then some coloring, drawing materials, and you're invited to illustrate that quote or something that stands out to you about Dr. King, and you can leave that paper square behind and we will add it to that project. So at some point throughout the day, throughout our time, do join in that art project.
We value your feedback and consider it essential for continuous improvement. After the program concludes, kindly take a moment to let us know about your experiences and your thought. You can complete a paper feedback form or conveniently use the QR code that's located on the back of the program to provide your feedback. Feel free to grab refreshments. We have coffee, water, and tea at any time through the program. And also, please note that the bathrooms are located at the top of the stairs outside.
So today's musical selection, all of our students here, will be performed by the Westborough High School Choral Union with Mason Chon on piano and Adit Krishna on djembe and bass drum. They'll be doing a song called Heartbeat by Kyle Peterson in just a moment. And we'll also have some greetings from our elected officials. That's followed by a brief interview with principal and founder of Brick and Story with Miss LaToya Thomas. Miss Thomas will then lead small group community conversations, all centered around this year's theme of walking the path to Dr. King's beloved community. While all of this is going on, there's also the children's program happening in the library up the stairs. And we're so grateful to children's author and Westborough resident, Dr. Wednesday Boateng, who is helping to lead that. And in case you're curious, that program is featuring a reading of A Friend Like You by Frank Murphy and Charney Giordin, and also a reading of Dr. Boateng's book, Aquaba Kofi, plus activities and a participatory music activity. So that gives you a sense of what the children will be doing. And the Westborough High School Black Student Union is also helping to make that happen. Dr. King described a beloved community the entire basis for our program today. And we now invite Amber Bach, the Superintendent of Westborough Public Schools, to share Coretta Scott King's quote about Dr. King's vision.
It's so good to be here with all of you. I am Amber Bach, Superintendent of Schools. More importantly, I'm a member of this community. I lived in Westborough for 30 years, and I find us on a journey to be, hopefully, the most beloved community that we can become. I'm honored today to read this quote by Coretta. "The beloved community is a realistic vision of an achievable society, one in which problems and conflicts exist, but are resolved peacefully and without bitterness. In the beloved community, caring and compassion drive political policies that support the worldwide elimination of poverty and hunger and all forms of bigotry and violence. The beloved community is a state of heart and mind, a spirit of hope and goodwill that transcends all boundaries and barriers and embraces all creation. At its core, the beloved community is an engine of reconciliation. This way of living seems a long way from the kind of world we live in now. Still, I believe we can accomplish this goal through courage, determination, education, and training if enough people are willing to make the necessary commitment. More true today than ever, and I hope you're here today to have your own commitment, and it's a pleasure to welcome you.
And we turn it over now to the Westborough High School Choral Union, directed by Allison Greer. They'll sing Heartbeat by Kyle Peterson. We invite you to follow along with the text of the song. It's printed in your program and also here on the screen.
Before you say the thing you're thinking to say, before you give the look you gave yesterday, remember Just like you, all have a heartbeat.
My goodness, thank you so much for that gift. We are also glad to have our elected officials join us for today's celebration. And today we welcome State Representative Kate Donahue to come up and share a few words.
A little bit of a height difference. Thank you, Pastor. I want to start by thanking the sponsors of the event, Westborough Interfaith Clergy, Central Mass Connections and Faith, and of course, Westborough Connects. I left Westborough Public School for last because I just wanted to give a shout out to Superintendent Amber Bach. This will be her last Martin Luther King Day event in her role of superintendent here in Westborough. So just a nice thank you for the superintendent. Martin Luther King Day is very special. It's a holiday that has come about in my lifetime. Some of the younger people will always have had Martin Luther King Day as part of their life. But for me, it's something that came about while I was alive. and it's been a good opportunity for reflection. I know some of my peers initially saw Martin Luther King Day simply as a chance for a long weekend. But I've had the privilege to be able to take part in community events across the Commonwealth. And I just wanted to share a quote I think that's important from Martin Luther King Jr. And it reflects on the topic of Coretta King's beloved community. We cannot walk alone, and as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. I especially like the part that says we cannot walk alone. Community is so important. We have many communities in our lives. We have the community of the municipality of Westborough. I have my community of the 19th Worcester District, which consists of 5 of the 6 precincts of Westborough, all of Southborough, I've got my Southborough friends here, 3/4 of Northborough, and a neighborhood in Framingham. Everybody has different communities, and we need to do what we can to make our communities strong, but we also need to rely on them, get strength from them. And I just want to, I'm going to be brief today, but I want to celebrate community and ask you to embrace all the different communities in your lives. Thank you again for all of the sponsors. It was great to have the students here. And on to the next part of the program. I got to see who I was introducing.
So today I'd like to introduce Dr. Wednesday Boateng and LaToya Thomas. Dr. Wednesday Boateng is a resident of Westborough, Massachusetts, originally from New Orleans with Ghanaian heritage. As a parent and educator, Dr. Boateng homeschools periodically and draws inspiration from her experiences to create culturally relevant stories that align with academic learning goals. Some of her published work include the titles, C is for Cowgirl, 3 Books in a Little Kofi series, and Who Colored Jesus. Dr. Boateng is available for pop-up readings, school assemblies, writing and cultural presentations, and early childhood literacy discussions. LaToya Thomas is the principal and founder of Brick and Story, a consultancy practice focusing on storytelling in the built environment to drive positive action in communities. With nearly 15 years of experience, LaToya has developed a unique expertise in affordable housing, urban revitalization, and community development. She is dedicated to creating opportunities for marginalized populations, particularly in urban areas. Brick and Story provides engagement and creative storytelling strategies and implementation services to government agencies, nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, and individuals involved in the built environment. Through their innovative approaches, they help clients effectively communicate their stories. LaToya obtained a Master's of Regional Planning and a Bachelor of Science in Urban and Regional Studies with a concentration in Architecture from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. She is affiliated with various organizations, including the Aspen Institute's WEAVE, the Social Fabric Project, ULI Washington's Women's Leadership Initiative Steering Committee, Housing Association of Nonprofit Developers, and Wayside's Ascends Accelerator Program, and Next American City Vanguard. We'd like to welcome them both.
And we're also grateful for Rabbi Rachel Gurovitz. Rabbi Rachel is rabbi at Congregation B'nai Shalom and a wonderful colleague amongst the clergy in Westborough. And we turn it over to the both of you as Rabbi interviews LaToya, and after that we move to our community conversations around the tables.
Thank you very much. Give everybody a chance to adjust your seating and positions. Welcome everyone to our 6th annual Dr. MLK Day program. And thank you, LaToya, for joining us for this year's program. We're very grateful that you gave us of your time on this particular day to be with our community. So over these next 20-25 minutes or so, I've just got a few questions that will give us an opportunity to learn a little bit about LaToya and the work that you do. And we heard in your bio there that your background is in urban and regional planning, working on development projects, particularly in partnership sometimes with architects. So could you tell us a little bit about your journey and how that journey led to the establishment of Brick and Story?
Housing and retail in areas that maybe were underserved. Thinking about community and recreation centers, particularly in areas where maybe the public facilities were 50 and 60 years old and certainly well past their useful life expectancy. But largely working on development and design opportunities where I got to really see how some communities sometimes get a lot of the resources and as a result get the access to those beautiful places, those beautiful spaces. And then other people don't necessarily get that. And that divide affects people's sense of place, it affects their sense of value, affects their sense of pride in themselves and their communities. And then 7 years ago, after working on a very, very contentious development project in DC that involved public housing redevelopment, and being part of a process where I ended up at a public hearing. I was on the development side at that point. I ended up at a public hearing where about 150 people showed up, and half of the people that showed up said, we really support this development. We think public housing residents deserve housing that is not 55 years old, decrepit, decaying, and we think there should be also more housing opportunities in this neighborhood because this neighborhood is really popular and no one can afford to be here. We had half the room in that camp. We had the other half of the room saying, don't really like the size of the development. That was probably the gentlest thing that we heard, with the most severe thing being, I don't want those poor people living next to me. And so from that experience, decided to start this practice of Brick and Story. And so a lot of my work really focuses on my love of place, my love of buildings, my love of how we think about land and how we occupy space, and how we make that connection to people. I do a lot of work thinking about how do we craft dialogue between regular people like me and you, with policymakers, with architects, with developers. How do we start to unpack a lot of that technical jargon and actually have real conversations about what the decisions that are being made about our place, how does that affect us? How do we want it to affect us? And then also giving agency and voice to people who historically may not have been at the table to be part of that conversation, starting to create those spaces. So that's just to give you some color about my background and really the passion that's brought me to this work.
So I've just learned something that we share in common. My first undergraduate degree for all of about 4 months was architecture, and I also learned that I had no job being trying to design stuff. So I think when many of us think about development, I think about profit, making companies. When I think about the conversations that I hear in communities, the kinds of questions that come up will be, and I'm sure we'll see some nods, this is familiar, we find ourselves asking, what impact will this have on our property values, right? What impact will it have on our taxes? What impact will it have on local traffic? What impact will it have on the local school system, or on the natural environment? Those are the kinds of questions that people are often concerned about when they hear the word development. So when communities come together to look at urban development in all of these ways, but also are considering questions of equity and inclusion, can you give us a sense, how does that impact the conversation and the community itself when they're engaging in things that, as you pointed out in your example, can sometimes be quite contentious?
Yeah, great question. And I'll even expand that a little bit. It's, urban development, yes, but frankly, development anywhere, also rural communities. Very, very suburban communities, a lot of the same issues. What I often tell people is I am in the business of dealing with change, and specifically I deal with people's aversion to change. That is, if I just boil down everything that you see on my company website, everything about the projects I've done, it just boils down to how we as human beings react to change, and specifically the change of our physical environments. 99% of us in the room don't like change. We don't like things to deviate from what we know. It's human nature. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But a big part of where the need is, and this is where my work tends to come in for my particular area of focus, is helping to harness the conversation around the fact that, one, whether we like it or not, change is inevitable. We all have to live with change in some shape, form, or fashion. The question is, what can that change look like? How can we as individuals benefit from that change? But how can we also collectively ensure that other people benefit from that change? And I think that's a really big part of where, to the question around these other issues that start to come up that are very, very contentious issues, particularly in communities that maybe have not looked very different for 50, 60, 100 years, and then maybe very rapidly you're suddenly seeing all of these different things happen. There's a new building, there's a new road, a corner becomes a rotary, you name it. I'm sure all of you may have an example. At the end of the day, what we have to figure out is, okay, we know there's some of that short-term reaction to change, which is the construction going to disturb me? Is it going to disturb my sleep? Is it going to impact me? But then there's also some of those bigger questions of, to your point, what does this mean in terms of traffic? What does this mean in terms of property taxes? And the thing that I often try to talk to people in the conversations that we structure is, if we are thinking about change of place, if we think about how places change and evolve over time, because all of our communities change and evolve over time in some shape, form, or fashion. The question is, how do we create community that is meaningful for all of us where we are right now, that's respectful of where our community has been, but that also gives us a pathway for the future? And that can look like a bunch of different things. It can look like what our physical environment looks like. It can look like housing. It can look like roads. It can look like schools. But it also can look like a lot of the underlying things that come with physical space that we don't necessarily talk about. It can be who actually feels welcome, and we'll come back to this word in a bit, who actually feels welcome at that community park, who feels safe walking down a particular street or intersection, who comes into a public meeting and feels comfortable enough to maybe voice an opinion versus maybe feel like they've got to keep quiet because of what someone might say to them in response to them taking a mic. So a lot of how I try to work with communities, and these are small communities, these are big communities, is really talking about, yeah, there's all of those, what I call very, very individual issues. There are the issues of how does construction affect me? There are the issues of how are my property taxes affected? There are the issues of how many people are coming in here. But there's oftentimes never the bigger question asked of what does change in our community actually look like? Because the community that we have right now is not going to be the same community that we have 10 years from now or 20 years from now. Like that's almost a guarantee in every single community that you look at in this country. And so if that's the reality, well then what do we want our collective community to look like? With the people who are here now, with the people that may be coming in the future. What does that mean for then how our built environment needs to positively respond to that change?
So that gives us a big picture of the approach and the goal. You've worked now with Wickham Story many different communities. Could you give us maybe just one or two stories to illustrate what that looks like concretely in practice with some of the projects and some of the communities you've worked with?
Sure, I'm going to go super macro and super micro so you can get a flavor of all the things. So going super micro, in a place called Montgomery County, Maryland, so just one of the beltway areas of the DC area. We recently finished some work with the Montgomery County Parks Department around a park called Rosemary Park. Very, very unusually large, several acre large park in Montgomery County. And our team was actually brought in because the county, the Parks Department, actually initiated a public engagement process to reimagine what was possible for this park. And this park has soccer fields, basketball courts, open fields, walking paths, kind of a variety of things. But it hasn't been updated in a very long time. They went through their own public process, started a community survey, and then realized during the survey process that nearly every single person they heard from in the process was a homeowner and was white and was over the age of 55. And the park, interestingly enough, one side of the park, if you look at a map, one side of the park is largely surrounded by single-family homes. The other side of the park is surrounded by about 1,000 units of rental buildings, rental units. And there were pretty much no representation from the apartment communities. And so they reached out to us, to basically say, we think we're missing some folks, and we're not really sure how to get to these people. And so a big part of our work was actually engaging directly with the multifamily housing community, which was definitely diverse in age, had a lot of families with kids, diverse in ethnic groups as well. And being able to actually engage them in conversation around what they saw in terms of the future of the park, particularly for how they use the park. We additionally did some pop-ups within the park because the soccer field is very, very heavily used. There is a very, very rapidly growing Latino population in that community. There are men's soccer leagues and women's soccer leagues that the soccer field is used maybe 4 times a week. And so we actually did an event specifically to target the teams that would come to play in the field to understand what was a priority for them in the park. And so through that engagement, we were able to get a bit more color around how people responded to different uses. In that process, some of the things that we talked to our client parks about was some of the things that they were hearing from homeowners, as an example. There was a written comment around, don't make the park too nice because we don't want more people coming to use it. It's our park. And so this is one of the things that we often deal with a lot is the sense of ownership. And when we're going back to this bigger theme of today, this idea of beloved community, people forget the idea of community. Like community means communal. It does mean that other people are at the party with you. And so we forget that public amenities aren't just that, they are public. And so how do we make sure that people of all walks of life are welcome in those spaces? Even little things that came up around issues of lighting. Some people didn't necessarily want more lighting because they didn't want it encroaching in their homes. But then other people said, well, I don't go to the park at night because there's no lighting. And so figuring out what that delicate balance is, but understanding that, again, you've got to have a wide array of input and feedback in order to get a fuller picture. And then also understand that this work of change of place is also about trade-offs. Not everyone's going to get their Christmas list. Everyone's going to get their wish list. So that's a very, very hyper-local example. more macro level example is work that we did for almost the last 4 years in the city of Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm sure everyone's heard of Charlottesville. So we were part of a very large team that, for anyone who might be in the real estate land use space, maybe you've been following, if not, maybe you follow the press. Charlottesville is one of several municipalities in the country that has been exploring many things around land use, including zoning. We were part of a very large team that worked with the city to finish the update to their comprehensive plan. Quick planning 101 for those of you who are not planners out there. The comp plan, all of you guys have some version of it. It pretty much guides what the development of your city looks like for the next 20-ish years, and it gets updated every 2 decades or so, 10 to 20 years. So comp plan, the development of affordable housing strategy, because if you've not heard, Charlottesville is quite expensive. UVA playing a very big role in that, as well as the tech sector that is rapidly growing in Charlottesville. And then a new zoning code, and zoning dictates what can be built where, how high, how big, what type of use. And so we spent a couple of years, also during the pandemic, which was a revolutionary time for all of us in the space of stakeholder engagement, thinking about how do we have dialogue with people from a very wide ranges of walks of life. If you don't know about the history of Charlottesville, Charlottesville has a very, very traumatic is too gentle of a word, but traumatic history around race relations. It still is it's a place that is very, very fraught with issues of race today. You will talk to residents in Charlottesville who are alive now who say, my parents were cleared out of their home to make way for the UVA Medical Center. And I remember when they forced my family out of our house. That is still very much there. And so for those of you who know like the town and gown kind of town mindset, like there's a lot of that dynamic. And so we had to do a lot of different forms of engagement with wealthier single family homeowners who were very, very much concerned about what adding a small level of density, adding an additional potential 3 units to a lot in the future could do to their homes, to their property values, to traffic. Again, this is as a way to create more housing opportunities throughout Charlottesville, because there's not a lot of new stuff getting built. We also had to similarly talk with older, lower income, largely Black female household owners, homeowners, around decisions that they might have to make in terms of what, from a policy standpoint, made sense for them as they think about aging in place, but also not getting priced out of their homes because the market is what the market is. And so we had a lot of very, very interesting dialogues, a lot of very tense conversations. The city has since very, very recently in the last 2 weeks passed their zoning ordinance. And I think the next couple of years will be very interesting to see what happens from a development standpoint. But at a very macro scale, that's working in an entire city where you're dealing with issues of race, you're dealing with issues of age. You know, folks who have maybe bought their homes in Charlottesville, have lived in Charlottesville for 50-something years, and don't understand why young professionals need to come living in Charlottesville and can't just go live somewhere else and just commute an hour and a half in. You're having those dialogues. And so again, it's kind of the same level of how do we get back to this bigger conversation of what does it mean to create community where we can make space for who's here right now, but also who we need to welcome in the future. And what does that mean for our built environment and how our built environment needs to respond to make that happen? And then what can we agree to as a collective?
Thank you. Those are two wonderful examples, and I can think of a follow-up, but the follow-up might get covered by another question that I have here, and if not, I'll come back to it. So we've heard in our introduction to this evening that we're here to celebrate and remember the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we've heard that quote from Coretta Scott King that he spoke passionately about what he referred to as the beloved community. And he describes this as a society in which there are problems and conflicts. They exist. That's what we would expect in a diverse community. But they are resolved peacefully and without bitterness. And policies are driven by caring and compassion. Those were some of the lines from the quote that Amber read for us. So how do the kinds of community conversations that you are facilitating, and like the one that we're in a moment going to be having together in this room, how does that help us get a little closer to Dr. King's vision.
Yeah, so, you know, as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of these, there's what I call a lot of issues. That's probably the best way to describe it. There's a lot of issues that we often bring to the table for conversations. And when we bring those issues to the table, we also often bring our mindset of the day, our attitude of the day, our energy of the day to those conversations. A lot of what we try to do with how we organize dialogue, with how we bring people into particularly contentious conversations around space and place, it involves everything from how we think about designing the room. You all are being affected by this right now and how we kind of intentionally design the space tonight. But it even goes with how we think about structuring a conversation. You know, I come back to this idea of community does mean communal, and it does mean thinking of others. And so to this idea of the beloved community, one of the big principles in our work is how do we get everyone back to the basics of human first? We're all human first. I mean, even the song that we heard from the chorus earlier is, you know, we all have this heartbeat. If we actually step into a conversation with each other, looking at each other as fellow human beings first, and then we can actually have a different conversation because, you know, again, from this idea of the beloved community, and I encourage folks to look at the King Center explanation of this concept, because with this additional definition, there's also a mention around, and I'm going to paraphrase a bit, but basically that in the beloved community, we're really looking out for each other, that no one suffers, and that we work as a community to ensure that no one suffers, and that everyone has opportunity, and that we are working together collectively. And so if we're working together collectively, it means that we're thinking about the decisions that we need to make as a collective. And it also means that we're coming to the conversations ready to do the work, to figure out what needs to happen to get to that kind of beloved community that we're all working for. And so that means that we are able to put aside whatever it is that we're bringing to the table to have those civil conversations, to have those conversations where we actually might disagree on certain things. And I think the last several years has shown us many of those instances where we might find ourselves in situations with folks where we might wholeheartedly disagree with someone. But how we show up into the dialogue is what makes it different, because it's okay to disagree with someone. It's okay to have a difference of opinion. It is obviously not okay to then walk away from that conversation with hate towards that person, or with saying, I'm never going to talk to that person again. So how do we, and this is where my work comes in, how do we structure it so that we can have these hard conversations while still respecting each other at the end of the day? Because we can't do the work unless we're willing to have the conversation and do it in a respectful way to help us get to know each other, but then also get to solve the problem together.
And I think that also that oftentimes when people come with a different kind of headset, where there's more of a, I'm going to try and make my case. We'll start from that place. That we sometimes have a picture in our mind of what something would look like if we got it all our way, and don't always necessarily anticipate, as you talked about, that longer stretch about the impact of one group getting it all its way in terms of actually even the group who thinks that they won, what their experience is going to be like in a space where others have felt disenfranchised. And I assume that in the work you're doing, it's trying to help create that understanding as well. That's a piece of it.
That's right. There's no coming into the work of the built environment, of space and place, with the goal of winning. We're not winning if when I walk into meetings specifically about housing issues, and I spend a lot of time in the housing space, we're not winning if we walk away and we know that we still have not solved for why certain people are struggling with their housing. Whether they're struggling to make their rent, struggling to make their mortgage, or struggling because they're living in a building that they can't get repaired because their landlord doesn't want to respond to their calls and no one's helping them. We're not winning. We're not winning. Just because one of us gets to go home to a warm place at night and someone else doesn't, that's not winning. And so that's really, I think, where we try to center our work and where we try to center our focus is it's not you win, I lose. It's how do we collectively win, and what does collectively winning look like? And maybe what do I even need to concede on for us to collectively win? What do I as an individual maybe need to take a step back on so that someone else can have a better opportunity?